Welcome to Satsang. It's so beautiful to be back together again after many, many days of not having Satsang. We'll start as always with one of the questions that came in advance, and then any questions that anyone here might have, I'm happy to take them. Why is forgiveness hard? Forgiveness is hard because we wrap our egos and our identities around the story of that which has happened to us. We start to identify as the one who was injured, the one who was abused, the one who was betrayed, the one who was lied to or cheated on. And we develop a whole identity around that. And based on that identity, we live our lives. And so if I'm going to let go, if I'm going to forgive, it means I have to be prepared to let go of the identity that I've created as the one who was hurt. And that's why it's so difficult. It's not just about forgiving that person. It's not just about letting go of the one mistake or ignorance that somebody made. It's actually about letting go of a whole way of knowing ourselves. So for example, if I was betrayed, and based on that betrayal, I don't trust. Based on not trusting, I don't have close friends. I don't actually connect with anyone. I don't actually open my heart. I move through the world with a closed heart. Well, I've got this perfect excuse to not trust. I was betrayed. But if I really forgive the betrayal, then I'm stuck with the question of why I don't trust. And so it's a lot easier to hold on to what someone has done to us. The other reason that we don't forgive is because we've got this attachment that somehow the person who hurt us is going to be the one who's going to come and make it right. So you harmed me, you abused me, you lied to me, you cheated on me. I'm hurt. Now I need you to be the one to come back and to say you're sorry. I need you to be the one to heal me. And the dilemma is it's very unusual that the same person who hurt you is going to be the person who heals you. It's not that it never happens, it does sometimes. I mean, we all make mistakes. We've all hurt someone we love, recognized our mistake, come back, apologized, made amends. But in general, the type of person who's going to create the level of injury and pain in you that lasts you months, years, it's unlikely, unless that person has had a profound transformation or is undergoing very deep therapy or spiritual work, that they're actually going to come around and really be the ones who are able to heal. Because remember, whatever they did in the first place that hurt us wasn't something they did on purpose. It wasn't that they woke up in the morning and said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to ruin this person's day. Or I'm going to ruin their month. Or I'm going to ruin their life. People are just doing the best that they can with the toolboxes that they have. And since so many people's toolboxes are tragically empty, it's like the situation requires love and patience and selflessness, generosity. But I don't have those things in my toolbox. What I've got are anger, greed, longing, fear, confusion. And so I act out of those and I hurt others. Unless we do special work to give ourselves the tools that we need in our toolbox, we're going to keep hurting people as we move through our lives. And so the idea that the person who hurt you is going to be the person who comes back and heals you, very unlikely. But that's what so many of us hold on to. It's why we don't forgive. Because we're waiting for that person to come back. And this is where it's so critical to say to ourselves, whatever someone has done to you, you deserve to be free. We don't forgive because what someone did was okay. We forgive because we deserve to be free. And so we let go. We allow ourselves to let go of that identification with the one who was harmed. Which means, of course, that we've got to let go of all of the ways that that identification is serving us. So I'm not having to trust or love or step up to the plate of my life or take risks or open my heart because, see, I've been hurt. I don't have to really embrace, accept that full, beautiful invitation the universe has given me because, see, I've been hurt. I don't trust, and here's why. I don't take risks, here's why. I don't open my heart, here's why. I don't believe in myself, here's why. I don't believe others, here's why. And so it becomes actually very useful to us, but similarly, it actually steals our life. It's useful only on the absolute most detrimental, superficial level. It enables us to keep hurting ourselves. But this is where forgiveness requires faith, because we're literally trust diving into the universe. To saying, okay, yeah, I don't know what's on the other side of not trusting. I don't know what's on the other side of this hurt, of this pain, of this wound, of this fear, of this anger. But I'm gonna drop into it anyway. Because I trust the ones into whose arms I'm dropping. I trust the divine. And we allow ourselves to let go into that momentary void. If I let go of my anger, who am I? If I let go of my stories, who am I? If I let go of what happened, who am I? We don't know until we do it. But it's through that door that we actually experience who we are. Because who we are not is anger, pain, fear, risk aversion. But if that's how we've identified, then we're about to see a whole new aspect of ourselves. So we let go of the identification, and we let go, and this is the part that also really hurts, of the idea that this person is going to come back and fix it. And especially if it's a loved one. Especially if it's someone we really loved and trusted, there is this sense. Why don't they care? Why don't they come back? Don't they know I'm hurting? And real deep forgiveness and letting go is forgiving the fact that they're not coming back. Forgiving the fact that they're not able to recognize how much they hurt you. Forgiving the fact that they don't have the capacity to be what you need them to be right now. But the good news is you have the capacity. And in your connection with yourself, turns out you don't need that person to make amends, to say they're sorry, to make it better, to tell you they loved you, that they don't mean it. You actually have that within yourself. And it just takes trust. So that's why it's hard. But it's also the only way. It's the only way to actually know who we are. Because otherwise I just identify as this whole story. The one who's angry. The one who's been hurt. The one who's been betrayed. The one who doesn't trust. So let go. Let go of it. I promise you're not going to plummet to your death. Your death. You will plummet to your depth, but not to your death inside you. But that's what so many of us fear, is if I let go of this, I'm literally just going to plummet to my death inside. And it reminds me of that beautiful parable I love of the man who's holding on to this rope for dear life. The same way that so many of us hold on to these stories and identities, dramas. And suddenly this beautiful angel voice comes in his mind and says, let go of the rope. And he's like, let go? I can't let go. I'll plummet to my death. And the angel says, well, then just let go with one hand. He says, I can't let go with one hand. My other hand will... So she says, fine, one finger. So her voice is so sweet that he lets go with one finger. And then she slowly, slowly convinces him, another finger, another finger, another finger, another finger. Until slowly there's only one finger left. And then she says, let go. He says, now I really can't. No way. Now there's only one finger left holding me up. I cannot let go. Now I'll really plummet to my death. But she convinces him, just let go. And so he does. And he doesn't plummet anywhere. In fact, he doesn't go anywhere. And he's shocked, and he looks down and he realizes he's actually been standing on solid ground the entire time. And I love that parable because so many of us, like him, hold on with these death grips on aspects of our lives, aspects of our identities. of our stories, of our dramas. And we really think that if we let go of them, maybe not plummet to our death externally like off a mountain, but internally, into that void of, oh my God, who am I? But we don't. The moment we let go of that which is not self, we actually discover we've been held up by the true self this whole time. We just didn't know it because we had this death grip on not self. So let go. Let go and forgive. You'll see, you can always pick the grudge back up again. Right? There's no forgiveness police that's going to say, wait, you let that go, no fair. You can always pick it up again if you don't like how it's going for you. You can say, fine, I'll give it till Monday. If I don't feel better by then, Tuesday I'm going to be angry again. But at least give it a try. See what happens if you let go. Does anyone here have a question? Yes.
When do we know that we want to come and stay here forever?
So if it's all right, I'm going to make the question somewhat more general. She said, how do we know that we're meant to stay here forever? I'm going to make it a little bit more general. The answer is the same, of course, but the context is wider. It has to do with decisions in our life. I mean, how do we make any decision? And especially really big life decisions. There's always more than one voice in our heads. We've got different voices telling us different things. The key question to ask ourselves, always, is for me, for my highest, deepest growth, unfolding, truth, awareness, what's the right path? And here's the thing. Life is about package deals. It's not a buffet. You know, a lot of us would like to think that we could literally walk through life with a plate like you were on one of those huge, beautiful buffets, you know, at like weddings or cruises or, you know, this just goes on and on and on and on, buffets where you get to decide, I'd like some of this and some of that and a big spoonful of this, extra side of that, lots of this, none of that. And the dilemma is life isn't actually like that. In a buffet, assuming that you're thoroughly prepared to throw everything about diet and nutrition out the window, you literally could put every single thing in the buffet on your plate and in your stomach. Right? There's no rules that say if you take from this, you can't take from this. There's no rules that say either an item from the fruit plate or an item from the dessert. Right? An item from the breads or an item from the rice and quinoa. You could have it all. Fruit, dessert, every grain there is, every vegetable. But in life, it's not like that. In life, you cannot simultaneously have the freedom and unencumberedness of not being married and not having children, and at the same time be surrounded by a spouse and your children in your life. You can't have both. You can't simultaneously not have them and have them. It doesn't mean that within beautiful relationships you can't develop wonderful free ways of living together, growing together. Of course you can. And that's what the best relationships are. But nonetheless, a spouse, children, carry with them a responsibility that is very different than a life that doesn't have a spouse and children. Neither is right, neither is wrong, neither is better, neither is worse. Both are amazingly wonderful. Both have incredible opportunities. Both have incredible challenges. But you can't do both simultaneously. Maybe you do one in one phase of life, the other in a different phase. But simultaneously, you cannot do both. You cannot simultaneously have a full-time job in a company, a business, a corporation, when you're a CEO or a president, and be a full-time stay-at-home mom. Doesn't mean you can't have a career and children. Of course you can. But you can't do each of them full-time. Something's got to give somewhere. You cannot live in Paris and LA at the same moment. You may have a house in both places if you're of that sort and jet set back and forth, no problem. But you cannot simultaneously live in both places. And so the dilemma when we make choices about our life is too many of us have been really indoctrinated to believe that there should be able to be this buffet. I should be able to have this, but it should come with all the benefits of that. Or I should be able to not have that, but still have the parts I liked about it anyway. Well, it's not how life works. I'll tell you a personal story. It's actually very fitting because today is Nada Jayanti. Now, Nadaji is one of the beautiful, beautiful sages from the scriptures, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and a beautiful, holy, divine, wandering sage, a Muni. One who observes great silence, one who does great sadhana, one who, as I mentioned in the Ganga Arati, really is this confluence of gyan, wisdom, and bhakti, devotion. He's the one, if you read the the Srimad Bhagavatam, he's really the one who guides and teaches so many throughout. Now one day, and of course there's always a backstory, we won't go into, because the way that so many of the stories in the scriptures work is they flow from one into the next. So we're just going to cut a slice out of this beautiful, sumptuous cake of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's the story of one day, Nadaji is walking through a village, and there's a king. And the king sees him, and of course he's well known, he's famous, he's this enlightened sage. The king sees him and he says, "Oh, Sage Nadaji." He bows at his feet. And he says, "I want you to read my daughter's palm. I want you to tell the future of my daughter." So Nadaji says, "Sure." The king shows Nadaji his daughter. Nadaji holds the daughter's hand. And not only in her hand, but in her face, in her eyes, in her being, he basically falls in love. Now Nadaji is a celibate, a renunciant. And here he has, he's fallen in love with this princess nonetheless. And he says to the king, "Your daughter will have a very successful, beautiful, long life." And the king, "Thank you." And he mentions to Nadaji that his daughter's swamvar. Now a swamvar was back in the old days when girls, princesses, got to choose their groom like an auction house, basically. All of the eligible young men would come forward, and the princess would wander through and choose her prince. So Nadaji was very excited to hear this was happening, and immediately he rushes to Lord Vishnu. And he tells Lord Vishnu, "I need you to give me the face," because Nadaji was not the most handsome being on earth. We all have different beautiful qualities we've been given, and he had amazing qualities of wisdom, of devotion, but not quite the looks to snatch a princess, a gorgeous princess nonetheless. So Nadaji says to Vishnu, "I need you to give me the face of Hari." Hari is one of the names of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu says, "Done. So be it. Tathastu." Now Nadaji's very happy. Very happy. I'm going to win this princess. And he goes to the swamvar, and he stands right in the front row, convinced she's going to definitely choose me because I am, by far, the most handsome guy around. Not only that, I also happen to be brilliant. I'm actually going to stop the story for a moment and go back to where I learned this story, because it weaves importantly in terms of my life story. So this takes us back to the early 2000s, almost 20 years ago. Now, I've been in India, as some of you know, for the last 25 years. And I officially took vows of sannyas, vows of monastic renunciation, in the year 2000, so 22 years ago. It was not a difficult choice by any means at all. In fact, from when I first came in 96, I knew that was where I was going. And I've shared many times that it was such an incredible blessing because all of my desire for things that were not in alignment with monastic vows, not in alignment with a life here in Rishikesh in an ashram, long before cyber cafes and coffee shops and whatnot were put in, long before there were, juice bars and Italian restaurants and whatnot. And by God's grace, the desire for those things was just scooped out of me. I always say it was like God had a vacuum cleaner and literally came in and vacuumed it out of me. So taking those vows of celibacy, of simplicity, of letting go of everything ranging from bagels to sex and everything in between was actually not nearly as difficult as I would have thought it would have been if you had told me a year earlier that I was going to be taking monastic vows. So, now we fast forward a few years after that, and suddenly there is a gentleman, and I find myself having desire. It didn't happen automatically. It began when he said to me, out of the blue, I had not even been thinking about it, but out of the blue he says to me, "I'm very attracted to you." He was a very, very good-looking, early 30-something. I was early 30-something, right around the same age. And suddenly all of that I hadn't even thought of, suddenly it came back. And suddenly there I was, full of this desire. And I finally went to my guru, to Pujya Swamiji, because I didn't know what to do with it. I knew I wasn't going to break my vows, but suddenly it was difficult in a way that it never had been difficult. And so I go and I finally bring myself to not quite tell him, but luckily he understood when I told him the name of the person I needed to talk to him about, that I had a serious problem. And he looked at me and he saw my face turning all shades of red and purple and whatnot. First he was like, "Yeah, what? What's the problem?" And then he looked at me and he goes, "Oh no." And he then told me this story about Nadaji. Okay, so this story was the story that I got in response to me suddenly having this desire that maybe being a sannyasi was not exactly what I was destined to be. So Nadaji, we're back to Nadaji. He shows up at the swamvar and and the princess walks right by him. And not only that, she kind of chuckles as she walks by him. And Nadaji's amazed. He can't believe it. So immediately he moves. He goes to the next line. Maybe she just didn't see me. And he goes to the next line, thinking now she'll see me. And again, she walks right by him, kind of chuckling a little again. Now he cannot figure out what has happened. He storms out And he goes to the nearest stream where he looks, because of course they didn't have, full-length mirrors in those days, especially the wandering monastics. So he looks in the river and he sees that he's been given a monkey face. He hadn't realized that the word Hari, while also being one of the names of Bhagwan Vishnu in all of his ravishing beauty, also meant monkey. And so Bhagwan Vishnu, being God, knowing exactly what tricks Nadaji was up to, decided he was not going to let his star precious devotee lose himself in this way, so he gave him a monkey face. So naturally Nadaji is irate. He storms to Lord Vishnu. What did you do? And Lord Vishnu explains to him, you're meant for things more than just marrying a princess. The world needs you in a completely different way. And Nadaji was the one who gave us the Bhakti Sutras, the teachings on devotion, and so much more. So after Pujya Swamiji finished telling me the story, he looks at me and he says, "Don't make me give you a monkey face." It's like, you get this together, I'm going to have to give you a monkey face. So I share that because A, it's Nada Jayanti, but B, because when we make decisions, we've really got to make decisions based on, what am I here for? And that doesn't mean that all of us are meant to be monastics. Of course we're not. Doesn't mean all of us are meant to live in an ashrama in Rishikesh. Of course we're not. But it means that when we make decisions for our lives, to know it's a package deal. There's always going to be parts that if I could trade, I would. And it's got to be something that is not the pull of the moment, the desire of the moment, the yearning of the moment, but that which is really in line with my heart's, my soul, ultimate calling to know itself. So there isn't any official way, any equation I can give you. Just to say, trust yourself. Trust yourself, you'll know, but never expect that any situation in life is going to be exactly perfect. And don't lose beautiful opportunities because they are not exactly 100% what you had envisioned it would be. Recognize things are package deals. And the question becomes, which package deal is the one that's most likely to give you the things that matter to you? I'm not going to tell you what should matter to you, but you decide what matters to you. And then choose the path that's most likely to give you that. Beautiful. Are there any other questions? Yes, sure. And then Maria.
This question led to my question. Thanks. So I want to understand if we could find a balance. As you said, one may not be able to choose a completely spiritual life. and at the same time is yearning for spirituality as well in a materialistic life. So isn't it possible to find a balance?
Absolutely. 200%. In fact, there's always a balance. A spiritual life doesn't mean that we ignore the material. We still need food in our stomachs. We still need sweaters in the winter. It's hard to imagine in this weather, but yeah, eventually there will come a month in which a sweater will be a necessity. We need roofs over our heads. We need to operate in the material world even as deeply spiritual beings. But even beyond that, as our highest truth is spirit, is oneness, is connection. As spirit in physical bodies, the way that gets expressed is in service. And so as spiritual beings, we are moving through the material world. Spirituality is not a renunciation of the world itself. It's a renunciation of the attachment to aspects in the world that keep us from focusing on spirit. You hear the distinction there. We're not pushing the world away. We're unhooking ourselves from attachment to things that are constantly changing. Because that's the thing, the material world is constantly changing. And if I'm hooked into it, for my happiness, for my peace, for my identification as self, then I'm going to be bouncing all over the place. So even as spiritual beings, we are living in the material world, but we are deeply committed to living as spirit, to not being attached. And the focus of our lives is not about acquiring and accruing matter, but rather about honoring spirit and serving. And so that works the other way as well. When you say the material world, what you mean, I think, is a householder life. Right? Material in the form of my spouse and children and in-laws. Right? As a householder, as a gresti, that is your spiritual path. It's why we say grest ashram. The ashram of a householder path. Meaning, as I'm living that part of my life, it is a path for me to get closer to God. As you serve your family, can you serve them as the divine? I don't mean in a, let me be a doormat and you can walk all over me. I don't mean as in a, your wish is my command, you say jump, I say how high sort of way. As it does sometimes tend to get misinterpreted. Serving the divine in them doesn't mean necessarily serving their egos or their agendas. Right? And that's critical. Because you can get lost in relationship. You can get lost serving other people's agendas and other people's egos. That's not the divine in them. And there's nowhere that it says, thou shalt serve your family members' agendas or ego or ignorance. Thou shalt make sure that no family member ever has to face something that they don't want to look at. That's not your duty. Your duty is to serve the divine in them from the place of divine in you. So you honor the divine in you, and that divine in you serves the divine in them. And you realize through connection to them, you walk the path to God. And relationship is also, it's really a yoga. There's a yoga of relationship. Because you've always got this choice. Do I want to be right? Or do I want to be happy? Do I want to be right? Or do I want to be in peace? Because in relationship, very frequently, those are your two options. You can either be in peace, or you can be right. You can be in joy, or you can be right. Because a lot of times you can't be both at the same time. Because to be right creates conflict. Because the other person, of course, thinks they're right. I mean, does anybody ever say, oh my God, thank you so much for setting me straight? Thank you so much for removing my ignorance. I mean, when was the last time that anyone who's married can think of their spouse saying it to them or them saying it to their spouse? Right? Oh, thank you so much, honey, for showing me the ignorance of my own ways. Doesn't happen. Maybe, maybe really, really, really rarely. In couples who are so deeply committed to spiritual practice that that's the core of what they're rooted on. But usually it doesn't happen. Usually you think you're right, the other person thinks they're right, and there's a clash. And so that's when you get to choose. Is it more important to be right? Or is it more important to be happy? More important to be right? Or more important to be in peace? And those are the beautiful options that you have in this relationship yoga. How through this relationship can I experience union? That's what yoga is. How does this relationship give me that union? Not just with that person, but through that person, how can I experience union with the divine? Well, certainly not by holding on to my idea of what's right and then ending up sleeping on the couch or making the other one sleep on the couch. That doesn't sound much like yoga, unless it's the catch yourself as you fall off the couch yoga. So use your relationship as your yoga, as your spiritual practice. Let go. Let go of things that are just ego. And allow the relationship to be a way to dive into a union with God through this being. But you've got to be prepared to let go of the ego first. And you've got to be prepared to see beyond their physical being and physical actions. Because otherwise we end up frustrated. You didn't do what I wanted. You're not treating me the way I want. You're not speaking to me the way I want. You've got to be prepared to look beyond the actions, the physical body, the words. and to look into the soul, the spirit, and to connect with that. And that is the yoga. Your soul, your heart, your spirit, connected to their soul, their spirit, their heart. Whether it's a spouse, a child. And in that love, you experience God. But you've got to let go of the little things. It'll be good for you also and good for the relationship also. Because then you don't have to think about them all the time. Otherwise we spend all day long thinking about the little things. Why did she do that? Why did he do that? That wasn't nice. I didn't like this. Yeah. Exactly. Beautiful. Of course. Of course. For the career, the same thing. See that divine in all. You may not be able to recognize it in their actions or their words. It's not that your boss is suddenly going to start to speak to you in Vedic mantra or prayers from the Bible. But you see the divine essence in them. You see them as the essence of who they are. And you realize ultimately you're just playing a role. You're just playing a role. Who you are is divine. Who you are is soul, is spirit, is consciousness. And at this particular moment, that soul, spirit, consciousness is playing the role of a CEO or a president or a secretary or a mail clerk or a window washer or a husband or a wife or whatever. But connect with the essence more deeply than with the role. Hold the role lightly. Connect deeply with the essence. Last question. Maria.
So this question is on behalf of my friend. She wanted to ask you, but she's not here.
Okay.
So she's in IT engineer, software engineer. So her routine is like sitting from like morning 8 o'clock to like 1 or 2 on the computer. So these days she's having a thought of committing a suicide. And nowadays she has come up with an idea that I'm giving deadline to myself. Today, aaj nahi matte hain. I will die. I'll set a deadline. I'll do it in 10 days.
She's seriously thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize. I thought just she was computer se thak gaye.
And now she is like saying कि मेरा deadline है, I'll do it in 10 days. When this 10 days pass by, and then the day comes, she calls me and say, नहीं मैंने उसको my this decision of committing suicide has been little bit changed. I'll do it after 10 days. Then before that I'll call you. And it is happening with her continuously. So how to go about it and how she can deal with this?
The first thing you need to do, the very first thing you need to do is make sure she's got help. Don't wait for that deadline to come. If you're getting a call that says in 10 days I'm going to commit suicide, you need to take action now. I don't know what her family situation is, but she needs to have someone there who will actually prevent her from committing suicide. She should not be living alone. You should tell her loved ones, make sure they know. That's the first and foremost. She needs to be kept safe. Many, many, many people, I forget the percentages, but it's a huge percentage of people, at some point in their life, think, I should just commit suicide. Fortunately, a much smaller percentage of that actually attempt it or do it. But a lot of people think it. But you never know who's going to go from thinking to doing. And you never want to take that risk. And you never, ever want to take lightly if someone says they're going to commit suicide. Never pass it off as a joke. Never think they're not going to do it. The worst that happens is you're overly cautious. It's worth it. So number one, the person needs to be kept safe, because for the vast majority of people, that thought passes. And it passes because whatever depression we were in at that time, or frustration we were in at that time, it shifts. Either the outer situation shifts, or our inner way of looking at it shifts. But something shifts that make us no longer decide to kill ourselves. And that person needs to be kept safe and alive long enough to have the benefit of the shift in mindset. And that's the tragedy with suicide, is that people don't give themselves the benefit. Such a huge percentage of people who commit suicide are young, who just can't see the possibility of a better future. And yet, if you ask most people over the age of, say, 40, even over the age of, say, 35, look back to when you were 15, 20, 25. Did you ever have a moment when you thought you would just like to kill yourself? So many people did. And yet, by the time we're looking back on that youth, we're able to realize, thank God I didn't. Yeah, life has challenges, of course, but the beauty, the gifts, the preciousness of being alive, you never want to take that away. And so you've got to keep the person alive long enough for them to have that awareness. Whether it comes a week later, a month later, a year later. But as long as they are suicidal, they need to be kept safe. Number one. Number two, I think they need to be medicated right now. I know this is a controversial subject. I say this as someone who has been on both sides of the world of psychology, both the receiving end and the giving end, with a background in psychology. Pharmacology is not, in the vast majority of cases, the ultimate solution. But in many, many, many cases, it is a fantastic temporary hold on a person to buy them enough time to actually use other methods to heal. The thing with medicine is it tends to work relatively quickly, more quickly than therapy, for example. More quickly than other practices that in the long run can actually transform us. But take, a good several months, years to really have that kind of an impact. The medicine's going to work right away. So I would get this person into a good psychiatrist who could prescribe a really good antidepressant. And again, I don't mean it forever, but just for right now, until this friend no longer is having suicidal ideation. The third piece is the fact that your friend keeps postponing the deadline means that there's a part of herself, it's a man or a woman, a woman, means that there's a part of herself that doesn't really want to die. And that's beautiful, it's perfect. Grab onto that part of her. Help encourage that part of her. Whatever it may be. Maybe she needs a holiday. Maybe she needs to be engaged in meaningful work. You said she works till 1 in the afternoon. Well, 1 in the morning. So as in like 20 hours basically, 18 hours. Okay. So maybe she needs a different job. I mean, it's a lot easier to get a new job than to kill yourself. Right? Because the truth is, whatever she's suffering from on a deep level, if she kills herself, she's just going to have to come back and do it all over again. Suicide does not remove our karmic burden. It just adds to it. So whatever she's experiencing at this juncture of her karmic journey, if she ends her karmic journey with suicide, well, she's just going to have to come back and do it all over again until she actually gets it right, until she completes it. And so really encourage her to understand, let's work with this now. Because otherwise you're just going to have to do it again in your next birth, and you're going to have the karmic ramifications of having committed suicide, of throwing away this precious gift that we've been given. So talk to her in that way. Help her see, invite her here. But first and foremost, she needs to be safe. And part of that safety may be, a psychiatrist would decide, for her to actually be on some medication to keep what's ever happening in her brain a little bit calmer for a while, so that you can actually work with her in a deeper way. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. A beautiful morning and afternoon to our family joining us online. And so much love to you all.